Live Fit Podcast, episode 72, Movement, Momentum, Motivation, with Dave Smith.
This is the most exciting time of the year for me. I love the energy and I love how dedicated people are, and I kind of take it on as my job to try and prolong that dedication and that excitement as long as possible. So professionally, that's what gets me going right now. The thing that I've realized is you can have the very best fitness program from the best trainer in the world. If you're not motivated to do it, and if you're not motivated to do it well, it doesn't matter one bit. It can sort of become contagious, that idea of healthy living. When someone starts moving a little bit or eating a little bit healthy, quite often they'll see, a little bit of change and then desire more. I asked this question probably 10 times in a row. Well, how will that make your life better?
Welcome to the Live Fit Podcast with Glenn Johnson, your resource for all things that contribute to good health. You will hear expert advice and interviews with leading authorities on fitness, food, fat loss, mindset, and the mind-body connection. You will find show notes, articles, and health programs at livefitpodcast.com.
Yes, this is the Live Fit Podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening. This is episode 72. I'm recording this in early January of 2016, and this is the time of year when motivation is really heavy on people's minds. They're thinking about their goals. They might even be admiring their accomplishments from last year. Today I have a guest on my show who was selected as Canada's Personal Trainer of the Year a couple of years ago, and he's going to share with us some of his motivational secrets. But first, I'd like to brag about somebody close to me and my life, my parents. Last year, 2015, they walked 1,092 miles. That's an average of 2.99 miles a day. Every day they walked. The year before, they only, and I put that in quotes, they only walked 600 miles. So there's quite a huge step up from 2014 to 2015. They increased by 400 miles. That's still quite a lot. I am really proud of them, even with the 600 miles. That's much more than I've walked. So that's pretty awesome. But 1,000 miles, that's amazing. That must have really taken some motivation to keep moving every day. We live in Southwest Washington near Portland, and it rains here quite a lot, as you can imagine. So they certainly can't be shy of a little bit of water or a little bit of weather. So they're getting out there. And when they told me this, I asked them, what keeps them motivated? What keeps them going out there day after day after day, even in lousy weather? It's a beautiful area to walk around in, so there's the visuals. But shoot, if it's cold and windy, it's, something has to bring them out there. So when I asked them what motivates you, they responded with an email with all of their points. I asked them to come on the show, but they didn't want to. They felt it would be better if I just read it for them. That way they could keep all their points clear. Let me read to you what my mom and stepdad, Galen, said. And I quote, "Fear of becoming frail and unable to do the things we want to do as we get older. When Galen retired, he had more time and no excuses to not walk. It's beautiful here. We love to explore our area and admire the trees, streets, and houses and the landscaping. Our 73-year-old neighbor, Bev, told us once that after she retired, her job is to stay healthy. And she's a good role model as we see her doing yard work most days. We told ourselves we have to walk every day, and now it's a habit. We want to be able to walk as far as our fit friends Gary and Diane do when we're together. Galen wears a pedometer all day, every day. It helps us keep the numbers up by quantifying it. Then you can see real progress or even compete against yourself. We keep an exercise log on the fridge. I made a calendar and we write down our miles every day. It's in front of us, and every day it's impossible to ignore. We're on a successful streak of walking and recording it, so we feel obligated to keep it up and not wreck it. We have a dog that loves to go on walks and can walk as fast and as far as we can. We walk together and talk and make plans. It makes the time go by faster. In bad weather, we bundle up, get out there, and take the dog for a short walk. Then we come back and go up and down the stairs a few times. We do not want you, referring to me, to be ashamed to say that we're your parents, considering the line of work you're in. Galen is motivated to stay active and healthy because we have a parrot that is likely to live another 20 plus years and will need our care. We feel slightly proud, superior, and smug to be able to, for example, go upstairs and not have to use the elevator or escalator. And finally, you, they're referring to me, you and your family are good, healthy examples of fit living. We always know that you're watching and care. We hang out with you guys, you're health conscious people, rather than hanging out with smoking and drinking and overeating folks. End quote. That was my parents, Patty and Galen. So thank you for that. That's really great. Those are some really great tips. And this is a series that I'm starting, What Motivates You? So anybody listening, I'd like you to go to my website, livefitpodcast.com. You can leave a voicemail or you can send me an email. I would love to hear what motivates you. Remember, that's livefitpodcast.com. On the right-hand side, there's an orange tab called SpeakPipe. You can leave a voice message, or you can also go to the contact page and send me an email. Or, hey, Glenn at livefitlean.com. Glenn, 2 N's, at livefitlean.com. And I'd like to read for you a recent iTunes review. This is from Aubrey New. And Aubrey says, and I quote, "Stumbled upon this podcast, have listened to 3 different episodes. I like the topics. The knowledge gained is inspiring. Keep talking." And Aubrey gave me 5 stars. Fantastic. And I'd like to remind you, if you leave a review on iTunes or Stitcher or any of the others, I will be happy to share it online. All right. Now I think it's time to hear from Dave Smith, if that is his real name. Dave. Let's do this thing.
Hey, Glenn. Doing well. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Oh, it is really good to have you. I understand you're Canadian, eh?
I am a Canadian A. Yep. We talked earlier, and I don't know if you did this intentionally, but you mentioned that you went to a hockey game, and at the end of your sentence, you said, "I went to a hockey game, eh?" And it was so natural, I didn't even notice it. But was that intentional or just came out?
It was pretty much intentional, but I want to tell you that I'm half Canadian.
So the A's aren't completely put on. There's a little bit of truth to them.
Yeah, I married a Canadian, so I figure that makes me half Canadian, eh?
There you go. All right, you're allowed to use it, I guess.
And I think I have a better Canadian accent than my wife does. She moved from Canada to Georgia and then California, and she's a chameleon, so she just blends in wherever she is. But it's funny because I can hear her accent when she talks or even emails people back in Canada. She's from Eastern Canada. And so even when she emails them, then she'll speak to me and I'll hear a little bit out. I go, "Oh, you were chatting with your mom or one of your friends?"
I did some schooling down in the States, and everyone would try and do their Canadian impersonation, and they all go to the same thing. "Oh, we're gonna go oot and a boot today," and I just think that doesn't sound Canadian at all.
Oh, no, it tends to be overdone. It's obvious. I have a cousin who is from and lives in Australia, and she has a typical Australian accent. She came here for about a year and was working, and people kept giving her catchphrases to say. What's that? Foster's beer. That she kept having to say that one, but it's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So Dave, I wanted to bring you on the show because, well, you're just a wealth of knowledge. You've been in the business for quite a while. You have a great amount of experience. You've been selected personal trainer of the year. But first, I'd like to just start off by asking, what is it you are doing right now? What's your main focus? What's your drive? What causes you to get out of bed in the morning?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. I guess I'll go give you 2 different answers. From a professional standpoint, well, we're recording this in the first week of January. So what's getting me out of bed this morning is a million emails from people who are looking to make those New Year's resolutions come true. And this is the most exciting time of the year for me. I love the energy and I love how dedicated people are. And I kind of take it on as my job to try and prolong that dedication and that excitement as long as possible. So professionally, that's what gets me going right now. And personally, I just made a move out to Vancouver, British Columbia, from Toronto area. And I'll tell you, this was long overdue because as soon as I got out here, the weather's amazing. There's no snow. And I do some triathlon competitions. So it's been fantastic. I've been able to run outdoors every day. And it's very, very exciting from a personal standpoint.
Well, welcome to the West Coast. And as I was telling Dave earlier, I live in the original Vancouver. I'm in Vancouver, Washington. He's in Vancouver, British Columbia, which is much larger and has a whole island plus a city. But we Captain Vancouver founded us first, and then later on a second voyage went up to what is now Canada. But it's pretty interesting that there's two major cities, or two cities by the same name, that are in such close proximity.
Yeah, and like I said, I didn't know that. I got a history/geography lesson.
So Dave, I want to find out how you got into doing what you're doing. You're personal trainer, and you're dedicating your life to helping people get and stay fit. So what was your career path?
Yeah, I do have a bit of a sordid career path, but my whole fitness path actually began way back when I was in high school. And this is a little bit of an embarrassing story, but when I was in my last year of high school, I was the school president. And so one of the roles of the president was to MC all the school assemblies. And after one of these assemblies, I was walking down the hall, and I can remember exactly where I was in the high school. And a classmate of mine came up. Her name was Nadia, and she said, "Hey, Dave, you know what I noticed when you're up on stage there?" And I thought for sure she was kind of hitting on me, was going to say, "Oh, you're so cute," or "You're so funny." And she said, "I noticed how skinny your arms are." And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but to an 18-year-old guy,
Right.
It really shattered my ego. And I literally that week went and got a gym membership. And so when I look back, it started 100% for vanity purposes to start exercising, so I didn't have skinny arms anymore. But very quickly fell in love, particularly with the nutritional a piece of fitness. And then when I was in university, I got certified as a personal trainer, and just started doing some training on the side. And my career path, at the time I was in business school, so my career path was taking me towards a marketing career. And I did do that for a little bit. Actually, my first job out of school was working for Hershey, the chocolate company. And it was the most ironic or unlikely job pairing. I was marketing and selling products that I never in a million years would put in my own body. So,
Wow.
Yeah, quickly I realized there was a disconnect there. And as my personal training business just grew and grew, eventually I started doing that full time. And that was years ago, about 15 years ago.
That's funny because my Australian cousin that I mentioned earlier, I had her on the show for an interview, and the reason I did that was because one of her first jobs out of college was working for Nestle. She was working in the test kitchen trying to make new foods and new recipes out of chocolate somehow, and that's pretty funny. You had a very similar job.
You know what? And actually, my favorite part of the job, but the most disturbing part, was we did a lot of consumer research and focus groups. So I was one of those guys that, you've seen it on TV where they sit behind that mirror, and then there's a group of consumers that are testing out different products on the other side and being asked questions. And it was fascinating. I loved it from a psychology and sociology standpoint. But hearing people talk about their eating habits was so disturbing. And I'll be honest, I just felt so hypocritical contributing to people making bad food choices. And so it was only a matter of time before I knew that career wasn't going to last.
Yeah, and that's how Carolyn felt too, and she did it for about a year or so until she could get into something else, and now she teaches nutrition at a high school level. And this is she's much happier doing this, and she feels good about it because she's teaching them how to work within a budget and make healthy choices, even when you don't have a lot of money. And I know that's one of the big objections many people have to eating healthy is the expense. So it's great that there are people out there. So you started becoming fit for vanity reasons, and then you fell in love with it. And how did you become personal trainer and then work your way up to where you are now?
Yeah, well, so I just was a real gym rat, honestly. I spent all my time in the gym, and when I was in university, I played a ton of sports and was always exercising. And I noticed that all the time people in the gym were approaching me and asking me, well, why are you doing that exercise? Or, hey, you look like you know what you're doing, and had all these questions. And so I realized they're there's a whole bunch of people out there who either have misinformation or are looking for information. And so I just went and started by doing a course and got my, quote unquote certification as a personal trainer. Although, again, looking back, I look at a little, week-long course and it maybe didn't mean that much. But to me, it was, formalizing sort of what I was really passionate about. And then after that, I ended up going and studying human physiology down in Florida and sort of made that a little bit more of my educational process. And I had the path of a regular personal trainer. I started training clients one-on-one and then eventually built up my business and built my own fitness studio and had a bunch of trainers working with me there. And then, I've got two passions in life. One is fitness and the other is nerdy tech stuff. And I started dabbling in the internet, and I had this problem where my clients would get in great shape from September until about May. And the clientele that I worked with when I was doing face-to-face personal training was a very affluent clientele, and the vast majority of them would go and live at their cottage or live at their second home during the summer months. And we wouldn't see each other for maybe 3 or 4 months. And without fail, everyone would come back in September and would have lost so much of that progress. And
wow.
It was really frustrating for them and frustrating for me. We'd spent so many hours, getting to that point. And so my idea was, well, I'll start creating programs that people can do while they're traveling and transmit those online on a website. And that's what I did. And that's kind of how I got into this whole coaching online thing. And then it just grew bigger than I ever expected, and I ended up selling my physical space, and now that's what I do, is coach people online.
Wow, I find that interesting that they became unfit over the summer months, where most people are the other way around. They become unfit over winter, and then summer comes, and that's when they ramp up their activity levels.
Yeah, and it totally depends on the person. Like someone who is more sedentary naturally, that's the case. They're very sedentary in the winter and then get more active in the summer. The clients that I was working with, a lot of them were quite fit individuals. And so when we're training hard all through the winter and then you remove that training, well, going for hikes or going for bike rides in the summer, it's very different than being in a gym and being on a regimented training program.
Yes. Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. And if they could put more into it, or as in the case that I'm sure you witnessed, they put less into it.
Yeah, exactly.
So you were eventually, in 2013, you were selected Personal Trainer of the Year for Canada, correct?
Yeah, it was sort of, I guess, my crowning achievement in the fitness industry. Honestly, it's a very simple story, I guess. Every year, so in Canada, there's a certifying body of personal trainers called CanFit Pro. And basically, anyone who's a personal trainer goes through this organization. And each year, they go through a selection process and pick a trainer or a fitness instructor to recognize with that award. And I got nominated, and there's actually quite a process to it. After you get nominated, I had to write an essay about, what it was that I was doing and why my services are special. And then they narrow it down to, I think, the top 10. And then those top 10 had to create a video showing some of their training practices and programs. And then they narrowed down to the top 3. And then each year there's a national fitness show put on by CanFit Pro. And it's huge. There's about 15,000 personal trainers there. And
wow.
Yeah, it was a huge audience. And so we're in this huge convention center downtown Toronto. And the 3 of us that were in the top 3 were sitting in the front row, and we didn't know who was going to win the award. And it was interesting because before they said my name, they started telling a bit of my story. And so I knew I had just won this thing. And generally I don't get very shy or nervous in front of an audience, but I realized, oh, wow, this means I'm going to have to go give a speech. And I hadn't thought about that at all. And I got so nervous.
I'll bet.
Yeah. So I went up there.
How did you do?
I fumbled my way through it. It was pretty bad in retrospect, but it was an exciting time. And that was a huge transformational moment for my business, from media attention. And since then I've had an opportunity to do a lot of writing for different fitness magazines and being on different TV shows and such. So that was a huge game changer.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. And you consider yourself a motivational expert?
Yeah, that's my big thing. When I started out, I was all about creating fitness programs that I thought were the best fitness programs out there. And one thing that I've realized is you can have the very best fitness program from the best trainer in the world. If you're not motivated to do it, and if you're not motivated to do it well, it doesn't matter one bit.
Yeah, that's true. I was talking with a friend of mine not too long ago, and he said his daughter she's about high school age, and her health and fitness is slipping, and he sees it going in a really dangerous direction, meaning once you get into a hole, it's hard to dig yourself out of it. And she absolutely has zero interest in changing things. She doesn't want to improve. She doesn't want to exercise at all. She doesn't care about eating healthy. What would you do or say if you had the opportunity to talk with at least the father and maybe work out a way to get with the to help the daughter change her mind? What would you suggest?
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up. I had a guest on my podcast, and we talked through this exact scenario. Someone had asked that question. It was about her sister, and said the same thing, and she wanted to help her sister get on track. And the perspective that myself and the guest basically took was, you can't do anything. If it's someone who doesn't want to change, it has to come internally. It has to come from within. There's a framework that I use, cognitive behavior therapy, and it basically is the 5 stages of change. And that sort of pre-contemplation is what we call someone who they're not even thinking about changing. It's not even on their radar. And
right.
The best thing that you can do is demonstrate, and so I'd speak to that father and say, demonstrate a healthy life, lead by example. But if he were to start pushing his belief or his choices on his daughter, rarely will that have a positive outcome.
Yeah, that's what I was saying too. There's not a lot you can do. Now, I have seen where extrinsic or an external motivator can shift to an internal motivator. And an example of that is somebody running a race so they can get a trophy or a t-shirt or a medal or something like that. And in the process of training and then doing that race and then the good sensations they feel after accomplishing this goal, then they might have an internal motivation. Do you think there's something that he might be able to leverage to get her moving?
Yeah, and definitely it has to be very strategic though, because if he were to use something that was obviously a fitness related goal, there's a chance that would turn her off or make her shut down. So there's other ways to tie in other goals. For example, if they have a close relationship, on a parent-child level, he could introduce even them going for a walk or doing some sort of physical activity that sort of hides that, physicality within the relationship that she might actually be interested in building. And that's kind of when I say lead by example, getting the family involved, recruiting her friends, making events where there's physical activity. That's a nice way to start. And then I think you and I were chatting earlier about this. We chatted the other day and we were talking about how it can sort of become contagious, that idea of healthy living. When someone starts moving a little bit or eating a little bit healthy, quite often they'll see, a little bit of change and then desire more.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And one thing I have said to my clients is that motion leads to momentum, which leads to motivation.
I love that.
And so you don't have to sit around. In other words, in fact, that's not even a good, I don't suggest this at all, but sitting around waiting for motivation to come to you, because when it does, it's generally a doctor saying you're going to die if you don't change your ways. So go out and get the motivation. Even if you don't want to, exercise works. Even if you don't like it, move your body. That'll lead to some momentum, and that'll lead to motivation, hopefully. Not always, but it certainly can.
Yeah, and the idea of tying it to something that you actually enjoy. So one of the programs that I will give my clients is just a home workout program. And I say, throw on Netflix and put on your favorite show and just go through this set of 5 exercises. And if you can sort of switch that mentality, instead of thinking, oh, I've got to work out, it's, oh, I get to watch whatever the show is. So it's, again, hiding that exercise or that fitness in there. Because, your example of this girl who doesn't want to exercise, that pre-contemplation stage is the hardest stage of change to move out of.
Yeah, yeah. Could last years.
It could, and you never know. You never know what the trigger is going to be to get someone all of a sudden to have that light bulb moment where they say, "Hey, you know what? I think I do want to maybe pursue this, or I do want to try something a little more formal in terms of exercise." And then they move into that contemplation stage, and that's the one where things get exciting.
Yeah. And, speaking of watching a movie, my parents used to walk on a treadmill and watch movies, and that was how they got their exercise. They lived in a place that was really not desirable to walk, but they knew they needed to move their body and exercise. They're not gym type people or athletic, but they can walk and they enjoy walking. So they bought a treadmill. They put a TV with a DVD player in front of it, and they would watch. One of them would watch half a movie, and then the other one would watch that half of the movie. And so they're not watching it at the same time, but they were watching the same movie together and walking for the same length of time. And they've continued doing that. And since then, they've moved up to where I live, and now they walk every single day outside, which they like much better. But it was a way to get them going. And they didn't consider it exercise. They considered it watching a movie.
And now do they walk together?
Yes, they do.
Yeah. And so you get that relational side of things. And then that's when it gets so powerful, is when you bring other people into it.
Yeah. And, they've really committed to that, and they've walked 1,000 miles in 2015. They just tallied it up, and they told me they walked 1,000 miles.
That gets me excited, even hearing that. That's so cool.
Isn't that great? I think they surpassed my bike riding for the year for the first time ever.
Similar story. My mother, she is someone who would say, I don't like exercising. And very similar story. She ended up getting a treadmill because she knew that she needed to do something. Doctor says, hey, you got to do this exercise. And I was just talking to her over the Christmas holidays and asked her, well, what do you do when you're on the treadmill? And she said, I listen to my records. And it's so funny because she's got a record player. This is like before records became cool again. She's got like the actual old school record player, but it gives her something to look forward to. Otherwise, she'd dread it.
Well, do whatever you can. And like I said, you don't have to love moving your body for it to work. It's best. I certainly won't argue that. It is certainly best. But even if you're just doing it for practicality's sake, it's still doing your body good. You're walking to the store or to work, or just from the farthest reaches of the parking lot into the store, you're still doing your body good.
I totally agree. One thing I would say, once you've sort of realized that you're doing your body good and embrace that and want to turn it into something that's a little bit, like I said, formalized, a piece a lot of people I find miss out on is kind of diving really deep down and figuring out why it is that they want to change. And I know you've been a personal trainer for a long time as well, and have probably dealt with a ton of clients. And whenever I meet a new client, I'll always ask them, well, what brought you here? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, I want to lose weight.
Yes.
And
maybe 9.5 times out of 10.
Yeah, or 10 out of 10 almost. I want to lose weight. And while that is a reason, it's a very weak motivational goal.
Oh, it is.
It's so ambiguous. It's so far away. It's, you have to make choices now for something in the future. And I'll always follow that up by, I ask this question probably 10 times in a row. Well, how will that make your life better?
Mm-hmm.
And, I was thinking about a client that I recently talked this through. So she says, I want to lose weight. I ask her, well, how will that make your life better? And she says, well, I want to start to be able to jog. And okay, we're getting a little more specific. Well, how will that make your life better? And she said, well, I want to be able to do a 5K in the spring. Okay, how will that make your life better? And she said, well, my sister, she's going to be doing the 5K. I want to do it with her. Well, how will that make your life better? And after a series of these questions, it gets kind of annoying, I'm sure, for the client. But all of a sudden, she gets down to this fact that her and her sister used to spend all kinds of time together. And that had sort of deteriorated for a number of different reasons. And she was looking for an activity that her and her sister could really connect over.
Oh.
And you think about that, like that statement, I want to connect with my sister, and my sister's really into this jogging thing. Holy cow, that is so much more powerful than I want to lose 10 pounds.
It is. And look how it translated. Her deep down true motivator was hidden by 3 or 4 layers of what she thought she wanted.
Yeah. And, I encourage anyone who's listening, you do that on yourself and write it out. How will that make my life better? And sometimes it takes 10 of those levels, peeling away that onion until you get down to something that is really motivational.
I use a similar technique, except I say, but why?
Yeah.
I want to lose weight. Why? Well, because, and blah, 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 and but why? And so it has the same result, but definitely a different phrase that we're using to get to the same place. So that's great. I love it.
And you know what? I don't think that most clients are, it's not that they're afraid or not that they don't want to share. I just think most of us don't know. We don't know what our real motivation is. And we think, in the media, we see all the time, oh, you got to lose weight, be skinny, be strong, whatever it is, all those sort of more superficial motivations. But we don't ever, like, when do you ever hear someone talking about get fit so that you can spend more time with your sister?
Yeah, that's great. And I totally agree with you. I do think most people are not really looking at the heart of the matter. They're looking at the superficiality, what they can see on the outside. Oh, well, I'm unhappy and I'm overweight. It must be because I'm overweight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And change that, and then I will be happy. But what I've seen, clients that are unhappy, who want to lose weight, and then they do lose weight, they're still unhappy. They just now have to search for a new reason why they're unhappy. So if we can get them to make a health and fitness a conscious daily effort, what happens is they usually have the physical body that they want to have. And in the process, they might figure out what's keeping them from being happy, and then they can change that. But you have to change yourself first. You can't expect a different physique to change your life.
Totally agreed. And I'd say the vast majority of people, if you sort of think about where would you like your life to be, or what do you need to change in your life to find that happiness, most of the time it's something social. Connecting with people on a different level, or being able to do something that you feel excluded from, or not being self-conscious to try something new, all those social things. And then as you sort of
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Live Fit Podcast.
Then the weight
Please subscribe and share with someone you care about. Read show notes, articles, resources, and learn more about our weight management programs at livefitpodcast.com. Once again, thanks for listening, and always remember to